Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. Today I'm going to discuss case study number 2 in junk science. Now actually I recorded case study number 1 and 2 together, but something happened while I was recording number 2. I was more or less accosted by a nice Minnesotan, a housed one with a really nice car, etc. Now I was recording that in an essentially empty parking lot. There were a few cars coming in as I made that video. This guy, he pulled in though, and he decided to walk over to my car while I'm in here recording, and he just stood about 2 inches away from my car and walked along the side, walked along the back. There's a lot of passive-aggressive behavior as characteristic of Minnesota nice, and that's one of the things they do to try to get you to leave. They'll never actually speak to you. It's always something passive-aggressive like that to try to intimidate you to leave. So I left. So here I am doing part 2 again. And once again, that was a housed Minnesotan. I've never had a homeless Minnesotan do anything of the kind like that to me, ever. But I have had countless housed people. What I want to talk about today is a bill in Congress. It has already been passed by the House of Representatives. It is now in the Senate. It is one of the most evil bills I have ever seen, and what the bill will do is take a tremendous amount of control over certain people's lives and steal their money. It's basically an act of legalized persecution beyond what they've even done before. Far beyond what they've done before. The thing is, their claim is that science underlies all of this. Now, notice that as I go through and discuss what this bill has in it and what it really is, there's no science there. There's always the implication of science. Whenever you hear me speak the points of this bill, you're going to think to yourself, yeah, I heard that on TV. Yeah, they told me that in school. You're going to think all those things. But there's no actual science, and that's my point. That's why this is a case study in junk science. If I was doing a case study in science, guess what I would give you? Data, methodologies, maybe some mathematics. Okay, I would get some laws of nature. I would be doing science. This isn't science, folks. This is junk science. Remember, a couple characteristics of junk scientists. A, they lie. They lie. They have to lie. They're junk scientists. But they're more than willing to lie. These are the same groups of people who got rid of the 10 Commandments in our environment. Why would you do that? Well, one reason is because if you want to engage in the behaviors that the 10 Commandments prohibits, then getting them out of our society means that when you do those behaviors, people who aren't thinking in terms of the 10 Commandments aren't going to see you as being as bad and evil as you really are, according to the 10 Commandments. One of those commandments is don't lie. I mean, technically it's don't bear false witness against thy neighbor, but don't lie. Alright? Well, they're bearing false witness against more than 1 billion people, and they're stealing their money. We're talking about anti-smokers, folks, and you're about to see probably the most evil anti-smoking bill that has been presented yet, and it's already passed the House of Representatives, and I'll bet you haven't heard a word about it, because they don't want anybody to know about it until it becomes law, and that cocked and loaded gun goes straight directly to smokers' heads. This is the law, you must do it. And so I never even knew anything about it. I didn't even have a fair chance to stop this. I wasn't told about it. The fake news never bothered to tell us about it. I'm going to tell you about it. This is junk science, folks, an existential threat to the United States of America. The bill I'm talking about is called HR.2339. House of Representatives 2339. It's already passed the House. It's in the Senate now. This bill was presented by a Democrat in New Jersey, a career politician. He's been in office since 1988. I was an undergraduate back then. This guy's been in office that long. He's never held a real job. Civil servant salary, and as you're going to see though, despite his civil servant salary, this guy appears to be receiving funds that are more akin to, say, someone who actually started and ran a large international business for the last 30 years instead of sitting in a nice cushy job where he doesn't have to work for a living. His name is Frank Pallone Jr. Might be Poloni, I don't know how to pronounce it. Poloni sounds like baloney, and that's too cheap a shot even for this guy. I don't want to go there. I'm going to call him Pallone. He presented a bill. The title of this bill is Protecting American Lungs and Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act of 2020. Anti-smokers, among their many lies, they use what's called euphemisms. They use it all the time. All the time. A euphemism is when you take something that is good and you use language to present it as if it were bad, or you take something that's bad and you use language to present it as if it were something good. Okay? This isn't really an euphemism, but it's a similar tactic, a rhetorical tactic. Let's say you, I saw this in Mad Magazine once. Let's say you're in a campaign and you want to, disrespect your opponent. You could say something like, well, his mother's a proselyte in a church. And the masses out there who don't have a very good vocabulary, they're going to think he said prostitute in a church, and they're going to have a negative feeling. But what is a proselyte? A proselyte is basically a missionary. It's someone who goes out and witnesses and tries to, bring people into the church. That's a good thing. But when you say it that way and you voice it that way, proselyte in a church. Notice how I said in a church very quickly after I said proselyte. I didn't want to give you time to think about what the word proselyte means before I presented that part about the church. This is manipulative language. This is not debate. This is manipulation. A euphemism is very similar to that. And this title is nothing but euphemisms. In Minnesota, when they passed the smoking ban way back when, 13 years ago or so, they called it the Freedom to Breathe Act. Freedom to Breathe Act. All right, I'm going to unpack this one really fast. Everyone had the freedom to breathe to begin with. There was nobody stopping anybody from breathing, period. There was no one going around with a ligature, cutting off your breath, and then you had to flag down a cop to come over and restore your freedom to breathe. You had the freedom to breathe. You had the freedom to go into a restaurant that allowed smoking, and you could breathe whatever's in there. Smoke, or if the ventilation's better, no smoke, whatever. You had the freedom to do that or to not go there. You had the freedom to go start your own restaurant that did not allow any smoking in it as the proprietor. You had the freedom to do that. You had everyone had freedom. You had the freedom to go in the restaurant and smoke if you wanted to. There was nothing but freedom, which is what a free country is supposed to be. As soon as they passed the smoking ban, there's the loaded and cocked gun. It's only pointed at the people that the people behind this hate with a passion and want to persecute and exterminate. Sound familiar from Germany? A certain group you hate and you persecute and you want to exterminate. The laws only apply to that particular group. Does that sound familiar? Freedom to Breathe Act, that's a euphemism. What it did was it took away a tremendous amount of fundamental human freedoms. Just basic fundamental freedoms that are endowed by our Creator according to the Constitution just because we exist. Now if they pass a smoking ban on an airplane, that's understandable. The person doesn't have the freedom to leave the plane. In a courtroom, understandable. They don't have the freedom to leave the courtroom. But in a restaurant or a bar or a coffee shop where the owner says it's fine with me if people smoke there, no, that was total freedom. Yet as they took away that freedom, they called it the Freedom to Breathe Act. You see, Minnesota legislators are liars. That's why I'm still in this car while they claim to care about other people who are not them. This bill is called Protecting American Lungs and Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act of 2020. I mean, I could spend all day just unpacking this title, but let's look at it quickly. Protecting American Lungs. I've been in this car for 5 years breathing in the fumes coming out of this tailpipe. For more than half a year, it is so cold I have to run the car basically all the time I'm in here, which is all the time. I mean, all the time, except when I'm at work. So 16 hours a day, and then on my days off, unless I can get a hotel, which I can't do as much anymore, 24 hours a day there. I'm sitting in here breathing the fumes coming out of that tailpipe. If you want to kill yourself, you can do things, even if you shoot yourself, you could survive it. Alright? If you take a bunch of pills and overdose, you could survive it. One of the most sure ways to make sure you do die, if you want to, is to huff a tailpipe. And there's science behind that. When you look at what carbon monoxide does in that kind of concentration in your bloodstream, you can understand why, if you huff a tailpipe, then you will die. There isn't a question about it. It could be used as a method of execution. That's how certain it is. That's real science. Smoking kills. That's junk science. There's more 1.5 billion people in this world who are going to smoke cigarettes today, and some are going to die just like non-smokers. Everyone dies. That just happens. But because people are smoking a cigarette, they don't just keel over dead. If they did, there wouldn't be an anti-smoking industry because there wouldn't be any smokers. As soon as you smoke, you would die. Smoking kills. That's what they say. They're lying. But there are things that kill, like, for instance, cancer. Cancer kills, which is the one thing these people refuse to address. They will address smoking, the behavior, but not cancer, which is why so many non-smokers have to suffer and die from this horrific disease, because these people have taken all our resources away from cancer and put it toward persecuting a group who they hate. If they want to protect American lungs, here's a word I'll throw out there that they will not throw out. They'll throw out climate change all the time. They will try to change the world. This Green New Deal, all of this stuff is founded in the junk science of climate change. It doesn't exist. And the one thing they will not mention is the one thing that is behind much of this cancer and respiratory diseases we're suffering from. It's called pollution. Pollution. The air you're breathing out there, now that everyone's quit smoking, the air you breathe out there is horrific. The air I'm breathing is horrific. The Minnesota legislature hasn't done anything to help me. I've gone to every agency in Minnesota for 5 years. They've done nothing. They've just told me to go to Hades. They don't care if I live or die. They don't care about protecting my lungs. They don't care one bit. Or any of the other homeless people living in their cars who have to sit here and breathe a deadly toxic soup. I mean, demonstrably deadly. My voice is gone. Look how gravelly my voice is now. I can no longer sing. My vocal cords are destroyed by this. These people are not about protecting American lungs. If they were, they would quit talking about the junk science of climate change, the junk science of anti-smoking, and all of the media that you see on all those topics combined would be how much you hear about the word pollution. And as they address pollution, everybody, smoker, non-smoker alike, their quality of life and their health would increase tremendously. But they won't do it because they don't care about protecting American lungs. So right out of the gate, the first 3 words in this bill are a lie. Demonstrably. Show me where they're doing anything about it. They're doing nothing. If they say they're going after it because they're going after coal plants or something else, it's not because they're trying to protect anybody's lungs. They're trying to pass their climate change control over other people, stealing their money through carbon taxes and such. The last part of this title, though, is what I really need to look at. Reversing the Youth Tobacco Epidemic Act. I mean, there's just so many lies in here. I don't know how to do a quick video on this. These people claim to be scientists, right? They claim to be legitimate scientists. Remember, legitimate scientists not only tell the truth, but in many cases, they will defend the truth even up to the point of being murdered, being executed for it. They will defend the truth with their lives. That's what science is. It's searching for the truth. And you don't devote your life to something like that deliberately unless you love the truth. Junk scientists, truth has nothing to do with it. They'll take the truth, they'll take a lie, they'll take whatever works for their personal agenda, which is to manipulate, control, steal from other people. persecute, exterminate other people, to affect other people. So if legitimate science requires precision, absolute precision in language, in mathematics, methods, data gathering, everything, let's see how precise they really are. Let's just look at the definition, the scientific definition of an epidemic. Now, I'm just going to Wikipedia. Granted, Wikipedia blows, but when it comes to simple facts and things, it's accurate. This is true. Okay, even though it comes from Wikipedia. Epidemic basically derives from Greek words that mean upon the people. Something comes upon the people. What it is an epidemic is the rapid spread of infectious disease to a large number of people in a given population within a short period of time, usually 2 weeks or less. So an epidemic is the rapid spread of infectious disease in a large population within a short period of time. All right? Let me replace that then, because you can replace the word epidemic with that definition in this act. The protecting American lungs and reversing the youth tobacco rapid spread of infectious disease to a large number of people within a short period of time, Act of 2020. Does that make any rational sense whatsoever? That doesn't even make grammatical sense. The word epidemic grammatically doesn't even fit into the sentence structure. That's how badly they're lying to people. But I'll tell you why they're using that word, because later in the Wikipedia article, down further, there's a sentence that is key to this. And that sentence is, and I quote, "The term epidemic has become emotionally charged," unquote. In other words, when you hear the word epidemic, you have a gut feeling. It affects you emotionally, not intellectually, where science happens. Emotionally, where rhetoric, propaganda, and human manipulation occurs. That's why a word that isn't even grammatically correct, let alone according to the definition of the word. Okay, an epidemic, it's a noun, right? It's a rapid spread of infectious disease. Another noun would be, say, flat tire. Protecting American lungs and reversing the Youth Tobacco Flat Tire Act of 2020. Does that make any rational sense? It makes no less sense than the word epidemic. You see, youth, what they call youth, and don't forget, to them, youth now means someone who is 20 years and 364 days old, because you can't buy cigarettes until you're 21 years old. So now, a youth, back when we had a stable society, youth were like, after puberty, 13, 14, get married, have kids, raise a family, and they were more competent at running a household than a 21-year-old is today. Because they were raised to be children when they were children, and then when they physically moved to adulthood and emotionally could handle it, they became adults and they took over. But we don't do that. We try to keep these kids in their little pocket where we're having control over them until they're basically 1/4, 1/5 the way to death already. So, youth epidemic. Tobacco use has been around for 500 years, and you know what? It's been used by all age groups. All age groups. There have been youth, young people, whatever you define young people as in this particular era, there have been young people using tobacco for 500 years. Let's see, rapid spread of infectious disease to a large number of people within a short period of time, usually 2 weeks or less. Youth have been using tobacco for 500 years. They're lying. Using tobacco is a behavior. It's something you do. It's not a thing. It's an action. Okay? Noun, verb. What they're doing is a behavioral choice. They're choosing to use tobacco. That is not an infectious disease. I don't even want to harp on this anymore. This is so offensive. No wonder people are so illiterate today. If they can't figure out that isn't even grammatically correct, how are they going to figure out the rest of what's in this bill? Congressman Pallone is lying. He's manipulating people deliberately with an emotionally charged term that has nothing to do with what he's even talking about. There's no such thing as a youth tobacco epidemic. There can't be. There can't be. All right, so let's take a look at Congressman Pullen's scientific background for a moment, okay? Let's look at his scientific background and training. He doesn't have any. I'm sorry, he went to law school. He's a lawyer. Wow. And then he sat in Congress since 1988. What is that, 32 years he sat in Congress instead of having a real job. So he doesn't even have any scientific background. That's interesting. I wonder why he's pushing this thing that's founded in science so aggressively then if he doesn't have the capability to even understand what any of this is. Let's move on from that, shall we? Let's go to the points of the bill itself. Now, when you go to the congressional website, when it lists out the summary of this bill, it says, among other requirements, this bill, and then it lists out about 9 things. Okay, among other requirements? Well, what are those other requirements? It'd kind of be nice to know what it is that they're passing. And don't forget, congressmen rarely, if ever, actually read the bills they pass. And this goes back. In the early 1970s, 1972 or 4, a congressman wrote a book called What Makes You Think We Read the Bills? Go to your library and read it. It's a small book. What makes you think we read the bills? They don't read these bills. Remember, existential threat to America #1 is cults and cult mentality. In a cult, like, say, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but when you're in a political party, if you vote along party lines rather than reading the bill and figuring out if it makes any rational sense or if it's maybe evil, and instead of doing that and basing your vote on that, and instead you just vote because the party line says to vote that way, you're behaving like a member of a cult. That's why they don't read the bills, folks. That's why it passed the democratically controlled House of Representatives. What are these other things, among other things? I have heard, and I have not had an opportunity to confirm it because I have hardly any access to the internet. I have heard that one of the things they didn't even bother to mention is that this is going to ban menthol, period, across the board with tobacco products. If you know anything about cigarettes, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'd guess maybe 50-50 or something along those lines, 30%. Smoke menthols. Menthols are like your cough drops that have the menthol in it. It's really refreshing and it's minty. It clears your sinuses, makes you feel like you're, like if you have a cold or something, it's really refreshing. Well, they have cigarettes that have menthol in it. It has that minty, fresh kind of flavor to it. They want to ban it completely, just annihilate it. Now, there's people out there who have been smoking for decades. Maybe 40, 50, 60 years, right? Because smoking doesn't kill. That's you see how that works. Many of them have been smoking menthols. These guys, with the stroke of a pen, without even bothering to tell the people who are affected by it beforehand, so that they could call in and say, you're not voting for this. Instead, behind closed doors, off camera, with the radar turned off, except for people like me looking for this stuff, they want to just destroy menthol, something that's been around for 100 years probably. There's a lot of people who love their menthol cigarettes. Now, there's reasons for that. I'm just going to give you one right now. I'm going to give you the second one later with another point. In 2016, one of these anti-smoking bastions of junk science came out with a study that said, and there were headlines all over the media for that. For that, they put headlines all over the media. It came out and it said, study finds that menthol is more addictive than non-menthol cigarettes. So people who smoke menthols are more heavily addicted. It's harder for them to quit smoking. Okay, that's what the study said. Now, I'm going to ignore what the study is and the junk science behind it. This isn't the right time for that. That's what this whole series is about. But the point is, A, one study is not enough to prove anything. B, despite that fact, as soon as this thing came out, and I mean within hours of when this press release came out, not science, but press release, talking about this study that came from anti-smokers, people who hate smoking. Within hours, there were people in the media calling for the government to ban menthol. Now, why would they do that when nothing had been proven? When there hadn't been any studies to verify and validate that what this study said was even accurate? Within hours, they're coming out publicly in the media and saying we need to ban menthol. Here it is 4 years later, and they're trying to implement that. Why would they do that? And don't forget, the way that studies like this are conducted, you picture it as being, well, they got out the microscope, the electron microscope, and they saw that the little menthol molecule came in and attached itself to the hemoglobin, and it wouldn't let it go, and that's why you're more addicted, or something like that. No, there were no microscopes. This had nothing to do with science, folks. You know what it basically was? This is essentially what they did here. They went out like the U.S. Census with a clipboard. Do you smoke? Yeah. Do you smoke menthols? No. Okay, thanks. See ya. And then they go over here. Do you smoke? Yeah. Do you smoke menthols? Yes. Do you have a hard time quitting? Yeah, it's kind of hard to quit. Thank you. It's basically that. It's a survey. They just go around and ask people, do you smoke? And have you tried quitting smoking? How difficult was it? How do you quantify something like that in any scientific sense? It's impossible. How hard was it for you to quit smoking? You see, if you can't quantify what's going on here, then it has nothing whatsoever to do with science. There are when you ask somebody, well, how hard was it for you to quit smoking? Would you call it hard or very hard or really, really hard? On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you know what to choose? How do you know what to choose? And then you can, there are people out there, there are some rare individuals who find it easy to stop using heroin. Very rare, but they are people who can do that. There's other people out there who find it impossible to quit being a serial killer. You see, human beings are different from one another. These boneheads, junk scientists, treat everybody as if they're the same. So they go around, and then they can use other tactics to, because junk science allows them to do that, they can take this survey and throw it out in the trash. They can take this one and throw it out in the trash, and then what's left, when they collate it all together, it looks like people who smoke menthols are saying, oh, yeah, I have such a hard time quitting, whereas the people who smoke non-menthols are saying, well, I have a pretty hard time quitting. That's their science to prove that menthol is more addictive. Essentially, that's what's going on here. This isn't science. This is what a marketing team does. Go out with surveys. This is lunacy. Anyway, let's get to the actual points that they admit to in this bill. Number 1, and see how I'm losing my voice? That's from breathing these fumes. Pollution. That Minnesota is more than happy to let me breathe for 5 years and going forward. Number 1, this bill requires the FDA to implement regulations to require color graphics on the labeling of cigarette packages depicting the negative health consequences of smoking. In other words, they're going to do what Europe and a lot of these Asian countries, a lot of countries around the world have done. For 500 years, while they've only had the cigarettes really packaged as they are for about 100 years. So those cigarette packs, the companies brand them. And just like you love your phone, right? You love your phone. If you have an iPhone, you love it. iPhone is something important to you. It's a friend. It's familiar. When you lose it, you feel something inside that just like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I need my phone. And then when you find it, there's like this sense of relief. That's what a smoker feels when they want to have a cigarette and they can't. And then they finally have it and they're like, oh, that was wonderful. These people call that addiction. Most people just call it you don't like being away from something or somebody that you love. Duh. If you fall in love with somebody and you just love being with them, you want to be with them all the time, and then they have to go on a business trip, you feel miserable. You're like, oh gosh, I just can't wait till they get back. And you start shaking. You're just like, I wish they were here. I wish they were here. I can't wait till they get back. Are you addicted to that person? Physically addicted? See, it's psychological. Of course you don't want to give up something that you love. And just because anti-smokers have programmed all these smokers to go out there and go, oh, I really got to quit smoking, it's so bad for me, blah, 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 blah. They can say that till the end of time, but the fact is they're smoking because they enjoy smoking. So when they try to stop smoking, they can't. Just like you can't give up your phone, can you? Try it. Try giving up your phone. If you have one of those smartphones, try it. Try giving up television. I've been there, folks. When I gave up television back in 1996, I did it because I was writing a book. I didn't intend to give up TV. I just moved to something else that took over all my time. And when I went back to TV, I was just like, ugh, this is disgusting. I can see exactly how they're trying to manipulate me. I never watched TV again. But before that, I was addicted to television. Couldn't get away from television. Couldn't get enough of it. There's no physical addiction. There's no bodily connection between me and television. It's up here, folks. So what they want to do is what the rest of the world has done. Remember, these packages of cigarettes with the brand, the name, the color, the design, that's created by tobacco manufacturers to be appealing. Just like Rockstar does what they can to make this thing appealing. Just like Logitech does what they can to make the packaging for this appealing. It's the way it is. Just like these people with the potato chips want to make... It isn't just a white bag that says potato chips in black letters. I mean, they had that in the movie Repo Man, but that was a joke in Repo Man because it's not true. What these guys want to do is force tobacco manufacturers to do just that. Instead of it saying Marlboro and having, you know, the designs of a Marlboro or Camel or whatever with designs of camel on it, something that is familiar to the smoker, something that they feel good when they see it. It's their familiar friend that's been with them through thick and thin for years. They love it. It means something special to them. They want to take that away from them. Like taking away your phone. Imagine if you have an iPhone and you're big on iPhone, Apple, and they pass a law saying that now Apple has to just go to straight, some kind of vanilla off-white color, and it just says phone. It can't have the Apple logo or anything out there. I mean, don't you feel like you're losing something in your phone? That little Apple logo to you means something. They're mandating that it be taken away, but they're going beyond that. They want to replace it. They want to replace it with color photographs on every cigarette pack in America. Billions of them on coffee tables, in purses, in people's hands, sitting on the table, up in the racks in the stores, everywhere, especially where children can see them. They want to replace it with disgusting photos of blackened, diseased lungs and dead bodies and just rotted teeth. They want to take stuff that even Hollywood horror movie filmmakers can't seem to simulate this stuff in a way, at least that scares me. They want to take these photos, and don't forget, anti-smokers are always getting caught, since smoking doesn't make your lungs black, right? Disease does. If you smoke, your lungs don't turn black just because you smoke. Well, if you take a picture of a pig's lung that is diseased, that's what the anti-smokers do. They take a picture of like a pig's lung, they've been caught doing it, and they go show it to children and say, see, this is what a smoker's lung looks like. And the kid's sitting there going, my parents smoke, that's what their lungs look like. And they're terrified. I'm going to lose my parents are going to die. I'm only 8 years old. And it's a pig lung that they're looking at. The smoker's lungs, lungs look diseased when they're diseased, not just because you smoke. If smoking made your lung look like that, then smokers would be keeling over every time they smoke. They'd be dead. There wouldn't be an anti-smoking industry because there wouldn't be any smokers. Duh. Or did you just believe what they say when they say that if you smoke, your lungs turn black? Did you just believe that? If you don't believe me, find a medical examiner and ask them. When you do an autopsy on a body, can you tell that they smoked by looking at their lungs? And if so, how? Are their lungs just all black and filthy and look like an ashtray inside of a chimney? Or do they pretty much look like everyone else's lungs? Because they're not diseased. These guys want to put pictures, color photos of diseased lungs, of people whose arms have been amputated because they attribute everything to smoking. They want to take the most grotesque, sick and disgusting photography, stuff that you're supposed to, as a responsible adult, protect children from seeing. That's why they have our ratings on those kinds of movies. And instead, they want to put them on all the cigarette packs. And they want to distribute billions of these around the United States of America. What do you think that's going to do to beautify this nation? Because if you go over to Europe or something, you get the country as it is, kind of like ours, and then you get this hideous ugliness everywhere. Now, do you think that's going to stop a single smoker from smoking? You tell me the name, put it in the comments. Give me the name of the one person out of the billions of people who smoked who have not ever been told that smoking is dangerous. Who has never been told that? Put their name in the comments, because I want to meet this person. I've got to meet this person, because they're an anomaly. They are a miracle. These pictures aren't going to tell smokers anything they haven't heard, and what they're hearing is lies to begin with. All right? The purpose of these putting these grotesque images on there is twofold. It is, on the one hand, in the hopes that if someone wants to start smoking, when they get a pack of cigarettes and they look at that and they'll go, oh, I don't want to do this. The other hope is that, and this is the main one, it is so that non-smokers who will feel just the way I told you a moment ago, they're going to be like, we used to live in this beautiful world, and now this world's filled with these horrific, horrifying images all over the place. And it's because of you smokers that they're there. But you know what? It isn't because of the smokers, it's because of the anti-smokers. They're the reason that all this hideous ugliness is going to be around our country. Just like it is in Europe. They're the reason all these children are going to be looking at that, instead of being protected from it. Like people who do not exploit children would do. Protect them. Remember that guy when they had the picture of the amputee, because they say smoking causes everything under the sun, right? Everything. Causes diabetes. Diabetes makes you lose your limbs, so they amputate the arm. Well, they went out and they got a picture of a guy who had no arm. And they used it for, look kids, this can happen to you if you smoke. Your arm will fall off. But the guy found out about it, and he was really furious that they used his picture for it, because he lost his arm, I believe, in a car accident. And by the way, demonstrably we can show that people die in car accidents to the tens of thousands every year. I wouldn't doubt if it's in the hundreds of thousands, but it's definitely in the tens of thousands across the country. Every year, demonstrably provable that people die in those. Take away the cars, and guess what? All those people will live. Remember, anti-smokers say, if we can just save one life, if we can save just one life, it's worth it. Do you see them trying to take away cars, which will save tens of thousands of lives, demonstrably? No. The reason, because anti-smokers like to drive. They like their cars. They only go after things that other people thoroughly enjoy, because they hate it. Do you see them trying to make it so that there's fewer accidents by requiring that every car get rid of its branding, that they all look the same, that they're all painted some kind of vanilla off-white, and that they put huge vinyl graphics all around every car? There's more than 1 billion cars in America. Every vehicle is going to be covered with graphic images of decapitated bodies. People with their heads ripped off in a car accident because the drunk ran into them head on. Little kids where their body has just splayed into a bunch of meat all over the road because someone ran into their school bus while they're sitting there texting on the phone. Do you hear one person calling for those kinds of warning labels on cars when it's demonstrably provable that tens of thousands of people every year just in this country die in car accidents? No, you don't hear one word about it. Even AOC won't go that far. But they'll go after this when it cannot be demonstrably proved that even one person has ever in all of human history died because they smoked. It can't be proven. Science isn't capable of proving that. Science is not a miracle worker. It has limits to what it can do. There's too many other factors in our lives that could cause someone who smokes to get cancer 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years later. There's more going on in their life than just sitting in a closed, silent, dark chamber smoking cigarettes for 60 years. They're encountering other things in their life. There's no way science can identify that. So this is just point number 1 of this bill. To take the beautiful world we live in and make it hideous with all these graphic images. The point of it is to make non-smokers hate smokers and fear them. despise smokers for filling our environment with these hideous images all over the place. But it's not the smokers doing it. The anti-smokers are the ones doing it. They're the ones with the loaded gun mandating that the tobacco industry do that. Point number 2, requires the FDA to apply regulations on tobacco products to all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. Once again, in a country that is illiterate with a poor education system, which is one of my existential threats to America, our rotten education system, if you understood our language even minimally, you would grasp that this is a lie out of the gate. We can even take it into mathematics. Set theory, something you learned in maybe 2nd, 3rd grade, right? Here's the set, right here, this circle. It's the set of all tobacco products, all tobacco products. What they say here is all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. That means somewhere in here is a subset of e-cigarettes. But this is the set of all tobacco products. The problem is that subset, e-cigarettes don't have tobacco in them, do they? They're electronic. That's the whole point of what an e-cig is. It replaces tobacco. They're lying. They're trying to make people who don't think properly, people who are illiterate and don't even understand the basics of our own language. They're throwing this at them, hoping they won't even parse out the sentence and figure out what's going on, and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, we got to regulate e-cigarettes the same way we do other tobacco products. In other words, they're trying to apply these regulations to e-cigarettes. They'd have no pretense for doing it, so what they do is they just try to slip it in there and hope you don't think about it. All you have to do is pass the bill, and it's done. No one's going to go back and reverse it later. No legislator's going to come out there on TV and say, well, I'm not the brightest person in the world. I really didn't read the bill, and when I read that line, it didn't even occur to me that they were blatantly lying, and I should have known the set of all tobacco products cannot include something that is the opposite of a tobacco product. Yeah, I should have known that, but I'm not very smart. No legislator is going to do that. So they're taking advantage of the stupidity of these legislators, the irresponsibility of these legislators. They're even exploiting legislators here. It's disgusting. Number 3, generally prohibits the retail online sale of tobacco products, including electronic nicotine delivery systems. All right? First of all, they're basically saying they're going to prohibit the online sales of tobacco products, including vaping. Okay? That means an entire industry, a really big industry, at the scratch of a pen, out of business overnight. Every one of those people is going to have to quit. They might have been working years to build up this online business so they can feed their families, send their kids to college. Overnight, at the stroke of a pen, and it isn't even announced to them in advance that this is coming. Their industry is illegal. Their industry is illegal. So they have to go to the unemployment office and live off unemployment, your taxes, while they probably will have to go get a corporate job and become a slave to some corporation when before they had built up their own family business. As for the other ones, the really big online businesses that are corporations and such, their whole industry, again, with the scratch of a pen, outlawed. That whole division's gone from their business. Can you even imagine what kind of an impact that's going to have on human beings and our economy overall? But they just put one sentence in there, and they hope you don't think about it. They hope legislators don't think about it. What I really want to talk about is this last line, though, including electronic nicotine delivery systems. I need a sip before this. That was one of these manipulative terms that David Kessler came up with. David Kessler was a former commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, virulent anti-smoker, and I'm saying right now on record my personal belief, and I believe I can back this up to anyone's satisfaction. This country would be tremendously better off today if David Kessler had never been born. If he had never done the things he did, the amount of happiness that this guy sucked out of human lives single-handedly, the amount of joy of life, the amount of relationships that this guy shattered with his incredibly aggressive anti-smoking cannot be calculated. And he did it by using terms like this. He would use all these euphemisms and emotionally charged words rather than science. This guy is abusive. One of the terms he came up with was, instead of calling it a cigarette like a normal person would, he called it a nicotine delivery system. You see, the point of that is to try to make people think in their minds, again, emotionally, not thinking, emotionally. When you say that, it sounds like, well, they're not engaged in a pleasurable behavior. They're just, like a heroin addict. You got the needle, you stick it in, and you deliver the heroin, and you're done. It's all over. It's a nicotine delivery system. You just, there, I delivered my nicotine. That's what I'm here for. The problem is, folks, that's not what smoking is about. Again, I told you all about the pack and the way that a pack of cigarettes becomes a familiar friend to you, just like your phone is. Just like as a guitar player, my guitar is a familiar friend. If my guitar disappears, I get really agitated. I get upset. I'm not addicted to the guitar. I love the guitar. If you're a smoker and you've been smoking all this time, that pack of cigarettes is really important to you. The act of opening it up, the act of extracting a cigarette, smelling it, flicking the lighter, whatever kind of lighter you use, a Zippo or whatever, seeing the flame alive, dancing, lighting it, inhaling, feeling that, exhaling, feeling that, seeing the smoke exhale. The social aspect of doing it with others. See, what I'm getting at is that there is so much involved in smoking, but Kessler just makes it sound like they're sitting down and just delivering nicotine. All done. That's not what smoking is, folks. The man is a liar. This nation would be better off if David Kessler had never been born. I'm telling you right now. But this guy's latching onto that term, even though it's absolutely ludicrous. You know who makes? There is actually nicotine delivery systems out there, believe it or not. Guess who sells them? Big Pharmacy. You know, the one who underwrote the anti-smoking movement, a 500-year-old hate group, and turned them into the most profitable industry on the face of the earth. Because they wanted to put tobacco out of business and steal all the money from them by selling nicotine alternatives. A nicotine patch is a nicotine delivery system. There's no social aspect. You don't have fun opening the package before you put on your patch. The brand doesn't mean anything. None of those activities are there. You rip it open, you slap it on, it delivers nicotine. Nicotine gum. You rip open the package, stick it in your mouth, chew it, tastes awful, and you're delivering nicotine. The anti-smokers are the ones who make nicotine delivery devices. And yet Kessler comes out, you remember, 180 from reality. He comes out and calls cigarettes nicotine delivery devices. Sorry, folks. If you're a heroin user, your only goal is to get heroin into your bloodstream. That's it. It ain't a social thing. They might do it as a social thing because they're junkies and they have to support each other. But they have to do that. But they're just as happy to sit in their car, as I see with these housed Minnesotans all the time, pull into a park somewhere and just inject it. They've delivered their heroin. Now they can go to work. Now they can go drive the school bus. Now they can go back to the legislature. Cigarettes are not a nicotine delivery device. They're a whole part of a whole subculture of a lifestyle that is very, very important to smokers. Whether you like it or not, it's important to them. People who are into tattoos, they have their own subculture of things that they thoroughly enjoy. That's not for me, but it's their thing. They enjoy it. Kessler. Number 5, increases the user fees that the FDA collects from manufacturers and importers. Money, 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 money. In a previous video on junk science, I went over the extremely simple math, and I'm talking about grade school mathematics here. Here's how much a cigarette pack should cost. Here's how much it does cost. 5, 6, 7 times as much as it should cost in a free market. Where's all that other money going? It's going to them. The people who instituted the taxes, the anti-smokers, and their government pawns who they own and operate. Their legislators. Do the simple math on it. Over 50 years, they're stealing at minimum $230 trillion. That's more money than any stock exchange, any business, any industry, any empire has ever even conceived of having access to. Anti-smoking is the most profitable industry on the face of the earth, and they want more. This bill calls for more. And guess what? It says they're gonna charge the tobacco industry and people who deliver it. But guess what they're gonna do? They're just gonna raise the price of cigarettes and cigars to pay for it. So who ends up paying for it? The smoker. Again. And then they're gonna raise tobacco taxes flat out later so that the smoker pays again. The tobacco industry isn't going to pay for this, just like when they had the Master Tobacco Settlement, which was in large part instituted in Minnesota, this hate-filled state that hates the homeless, that hates smokers, that seems to just hate everybody, even as they go around saying, oh yeah, you betcha, we're nice, Minnesota nice. This is the most hateful place I've ever seen in my life. Look at what they do to people. Look at what they did to me. And they're going to steal more money. Number 6, directs the FDA to regulate products containing synthetic nicotine. In other words, nicotine that does not derive naturally from tobacco. All right, remember, here's the theory, right? Here's the simple-minded, don't think about it too hard theory from anti-smokers. Cigarettes include nicotine, tar and nicotine, right? You got to advertise what the tar and nicotine levels are. The problem with nicotine is that it's addictive. Since it's addictive, you can't stop once you learn that the tar causes cancer and emphysema and heart disease and your arm falling off and your teeth rotting and impotence. They say it causes impotence, which is interesting because if it did, again, there wouldn't be a problem because if you smoke, you therefore cannot have children. And their big complaint is that children keep seeing their parents smoking and that's what makes them want to smoke. But you see, according to them, it causes impotence, which if it was true, they wouldn't be having children. You see how this works, right? They lie. They're liars. They're not legitimate scientists who love the truth. Junk scientists lie. The theory is that nicotine is addictive. The problem with nicotine in cigarettes is that it makes it so you can't stop. It's impossible. It's impossible to quit, ever. You're stuck forever. You're a lifelong smoker. But the tar is causing all these other problems for you. Alright? That's the theory. Well, I've already gone over addiction a little bit here, right? Let me have your phone. Can I take your phone away from you? Let's see if you start feeling anything inside. A little shaky, a little nervous, a little agitated. Let's see if you start feeling uncomfortable if I take away your phone. If I take away your television set. What if I take away your child? Is that going to agitate you? But you're not physically addicted to your child, are you? You just love your child. You love your phone. You love your idiot box, the television. If someone takes it away from you, you feel agitated. Well, if you're smoking and you're doing it like all day, every day, it's something that's just a part of your life, and it's taken away from you, like you get on a plane or whatever, or you go into a place where you can't smoke for 2 or 3 hours, duh, you get agitated. Are you really physically addicted to it, or is it just like anything else in life? The point is, their claim about nicotine is that it's addictive. That's the problem. It isn't that nicotine causes any disease, it's that it's addictive. It's the reason you can't stop smoking, period. Well, at least half the time. Again, they say whatever they need to say at any given moment. Other times they say it's easy to quit, as long as you use their products. But most of the time they say it's impossible to quit. Don't even start. Once you start it, you can't quit. It's more addictive than heroin. Yeah, whatever. Right, yeah. What an insult to heroin addicts. What an insult. You ever seen someone coming off heroin? They're just shaking. They're dying. They are literally dying. These demons of hell are surrounding them. They go through that, and some anti-smoker comes out and makes a mockery out of their suffering and says, oh, those people over there who are just a little agitated because they don't have a cigarette for a couple hours on a flight, they're more addicted than you are. What an insult. Anti-smokers just make me sick to my stomach. They are just disgusting people. Their view of reality is so sick and twisted. Nicotine does not cause disease. Nicotine, in fact, is probably the only really good drug out there. Among other things, it sharpens and focuses your mind. It lets you focus on things. I don't know. I'm just going to throw this at you. I'm not making any claim here, to be honest. I honestly am not. But you can't help noticing, as people were smoking, remember, when I talk about smokers and non-smokers taking us from the Stone Age to the Space Age, they had to focus to do that. They had to focus on science and math. They had to focus on engineering. They had to focus on manufacturing. They didn't have attention deficit disorder. They were focusing. And maybe people who had trouble with that, they benefited from smoking because the nicotine lets you focus. It's a good thing. Another thing about nicotine is you can't overdose on it. Your body will not allow it. It won't allow you to take in that much. That's why, unless you as an individual can handle it, people don't smoke constantly. There are some people who do, but most people smoke and they go a half hour, then they smoke again, 20 minutes, they smoke again. But you can't force even the most enthusiastic smoker to just smoke all day. Their body will not allow them to do that. It rejects it. It's self-regulating. See, you can't overdose on it. What you can do is what in that movie, Thank You for Smoking, the anti-smokers kidnapped that cigarette marketer and they put him in a van against his will, which is against the law, by the way. I mean, this is fiction, but still, this is how anti-smokers function. And they covered his whole body with nicotine patches so that he got nicotine poisoning. That's how you get nicotine poisoning. You have to have some evil kidnapper, lawbreaker, like an anti-smoker, kidnap you, force you against your will to ingest more nicotine than your body will naturally allow you to do. That's how you overdose on nicotine. There's no problem with nicotine, folks. I'm sorry. I'm not saying you should take nicotine. I'm just saying it isn't even a problem. But this calls for them to regulate synthetic nicotine, just like they regulate nicotine. Nicotine does not cause cancer. Nicotine is actually probably, if there is such a thing as a good drug, it's the good drug. As smoking rates plummeted, remember what I was saying about how when people smoke freely, we focused as a nation, as individuals, as engineers, and we built a magnificent world? And then the anti-smokers took over. Everyone stopped smoking, and what happened at the same time? Because the stop smoking thing started in the mid-'80s, mid to late 80s. What else became in the news around that time and has only gotten worse? What else happened, folks? Attention deficit disorder and all those related issues that they talk about where people are having trouble focusing and they're having trouble maintaining their attention. Maybe, just maybe, people who needed something to help them focus in the past went to cigarettes as one of the benefits they had. And now that they can't do it, you're starting to see the effects of it. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but it's worth considering because the correlation is there and it needs to be looked at. Number 7. This bill exempts from all these requirements. It exempts certain cigars from pre-market review requirements. In other words, you come up with a cigar, you're going to take it to market. Well, normally you have to have a review of that, right? The FDA, just like with medical devices that I worked in, there's all kinds of review they have to do before they sign off on you being legally allowed to sell that medical device. Same thing with this. But it exempts, for all the hatred, for all the persecution, for all the evil in this bill, it exempts certain cigars. Why would it do that, folks? Why? Why would they possibly take just a few cigars and exempt it? Maybe it has something to do with this. Look at this graphic. Here's Congressman Frank Pallone Jr. Look over to the right of his smiling face. Look at his largest donors. You see that second largest donor? That is a holding company. It's a holding company. It's a conglomerate of a whole bunch of businesses. They have nothing to do with tobacco or tobacco sales except one thing: certain cigars. You see, they donate money to Frank Pallone and their product gets exempted. We'll talk more about how much money Frank Pallone is working with soon enough. Enough said on that. This is a swamp, folks. This is what Donald Trump is trying to drain. He needs your help to do this. Number 8, establishes a demonstration grant program to develop strategies for smoking cessation in medically underserved communities. Medically underserved communities, another euphemism. What does that mean? Imagine you're in a community and there isn't much medical service. Just think of it that way. Are you talking about the Hamptons? Are you talking about Malibu in California? Are you talking about La Jolla? Or are you talking about the ghetto? What do you think? Medically underserved communities is their code word for ghettos. Who's in a ghetto generally? Now, granted, anyone can be there. Asians, Hispanics, blacks, whites, anyone can be in a ghetto. But generally speaking, what do you associate with ghettos? Just telling the truth, folks. Generally speaking, our ghettos are comprised of blacks. It shouldn't be that way. We never should have allowed it to happen, but it has. It's the reality of the situation. So what they're really talking about here is establishing grant programs to develop strategies for smoking cessation in black ghettos. That's essentially what you're talking about. They're also talking about Hispanics, Asians, and whites who are in that situation. But for what it's worth, I'm going to show you where I'm going with this. For decades, anti-smokers have made an association between black smokers and menthol. For reasons unknown, black people tend to smoke menthols more than white people do. I don't know why. And it doesn't matter, does it? It's their choice. But, there's always, whenever you look at any population, there's more people here who do this than them. But if you go to another state or another community, it might be the other way around. It's on average is where it's 50-50. But it just happens right now anyway that blacks tend to smoke menthols more than whites. Whatever. Maybe there's something in their DNA that likes the minty flavor. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe if you let it go naturally, in 70 years, it would go the other direction and whites would be more inclined to smoke menthol. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But this is code word. You see, remember in one of my junk science videos, I read you a quote from Darwin, a couple quotes from Charles Darwin, who's ultimately behind this kind of eugenics, which is what this is. This is them trying to redesign the human species their way. Smokers are not allowed in my species. We're going to filter them out. We're going to exterminate them. And in a free country, this is how we have to do it. Charles Darwin had horrifying things to say about what he called the inferior races, black people. He had horrible things to say about women, the inferior sex. He came right out and said it, folks. This is all about racism. These anti-smokers engage in both racism and sexism, and they have all along. They have always said that blacks are more likely to smoke menthols. Now, they try to come up with reasons why that would be, but the fact is, what are they doing? There's two things going on here. Remember, I said there's one thing in this bill that isn't even mentioned in this list that I've heard about and I haven't been able to confirm, that they're trying to just get rid of menthol. If you get rid of menthol, then by their reasoning, all these black smokers, immediately, the thing that they love is gone. It's no longer available. They've caused incalculable personal pain and suffering to all these black people by getting rid of menthol. And their theory is that there's something about blacks that has to smoke menthol. So they seem to think that if they do that, then all those black people will just stop smoking. They're not going to switch over to non-menthol, which is dumb, because there's more to smoking than just the menthol minty flavor. The other thing is that when you're in a ghetto of any kind, no matter who's in there, one characteristic of a ghetto generally is that the education there ain't that good. It's about as good as the education these legislators seem to have. It isn't very good. Well, don't forget, one of my existential threats to America is our rotten education system, because it has become an indoctrination factory rather than an education. What does that mean? It means that kids who go through our education system are indoctrinated to believe all of these lies about smoking and about smokers. They're indoctrinated. It's never proven to them scientifically. They're indoctrinated to believe it like a religion. Well, what if you have a poor education system? That means you're not subject to that kind of indoctrination, are you? At least not as aggressively. And that might help explain why when you go to a ghetto, one other characteristic of a ghetto is much more of a live and let live atmosphere, like the country used to have before anti-smokers existed, before they took power. Oh, you smoke? Whatever. Let's go get something done. That's what it is in a ghetto. They don't care. They don't sit there and go, oh my God, you're smoking. I gotta hide my kids. They don't do that because they haven't been filled with all these lies about what smoking is. It's like, oh, you smoke? Okay, whatever. I don't. Let's go. Let's go do something together. And they don't like that. They don't like the idea of smokers and non-smokers getting along famously. They hate it. They want them to hate each other. All anti-smokers do is create division and discord, creating a class warfare, essentially. The problem is, in a ghetto, you don't have that as much. You have gangs and things like that cause divisions, but they haven't been indoctrinated to absolutely, utterly hate and fear and feel terror because somebody's smoking a cigarette next to them. So what are these strategies for smoking cessation in these ghettos? In other words, they're going to bring that indoctrination into these ghettos. The indoctrination they're not getting from their school. They're not going to bring in the mathematics that they're not getting from their school. They're not going to bring in the legitimate science they're not getting from their schools. They're not going to bring in the literacy and the numeracy and the understanding of human history, political science. They're not going to bring in any of that stuff that's missing from their education system. But they're going to spend money, grant programs, to bring in this specific indoctrination that they're not getting from good quality schools. In other words, they're going to create a class warfare between smokers and non-smokers in places, the few remaining pockets of society where it doesn't exist. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. There's more to it than that, but I can't go into it. I do have to mention about the sexism, though. Another thing anti-smokers have said all along, since the 60s, Virginia Slims, they had all their ads. They were the first ones to really come out with these really beautiful, elegant, well-dressed women, just sitting there smoking and looking, and frankly, they just look great, right? I mean, Betty Davis always said, I never would have been famous at all if I hadn't smoked. It was the affectation of it all that made me so popular. And Virginia Slims jumped on that. And they did these ads with these women, just looking elegant and just looking beautiful, right? And they're smoking. Well, the anti-smokers came out then, and they have continued to say it all along, that the tobacco industry targets women. And they also say that they target black people. But I've talked enough on that. Can't go into more. But they say they target women. You know what? Anyone who markets just about any product is going to look for every subset of their market that they can target. It's called marketing. It's how you sell things in the modern world. Of course tobacco is going to do that as well. If you're trying to market to smokers, they market to men as well. What do you think the Marlboro Man is? What do you think the Winston Man is? Why do you think all those ads in the 50s showed men? Not the effeminate things we have today, but men. The guys who went to war and died, and they lost their arms. They lost their arms while they're smoking because they got shot or they stepped on a mine, not because they were smoking a cigarette. These were real men. Those ads targeted those men. But do you ever hear anti-smokers saying, well, tobacco industry targets men? You never hear a word about it. But you always hear them say they target women. What does that really mean? Duh. Obviously. It means that anti-smokers think that women are more susceptible to advertising than men are. In other words, just like Darwin said, women are dumber than men. Just a bunch of ditzes, easy to manipulate, piece of cake. Just put a woman in a dress, give her a cigarette, and every woman in America has no choice anymore but to smoke cigarettes. That's what they're saying. The sexism is inherent in that. It has been since the 60s. Anti-smokers are disgusting, sick individuals. Number 9, increase the civil penalties for certain violations of restrictions on the sale of tobacco products. If you sell cigarettes to what they call minors, what now they consider a minor someone who's 21 years old or just under 21 years old. These people are insane. These people are insane. Let's say you're 18 years old, an 18-year-old guy. You fall in love with a 17-year-old girl. You love each other dearly. Maybe you met even years before. Once you become 19, she becomes 18, you get married. You have a child. You go off and join the military. You're fighting to defend freedom, and you could die at age 19. She stays home with the kids, and she starts her home business. Maybe she starts a mail order business for tobacco products, for example, or something. Both of you smoke. Okay? So you're going along fine. You've got a wonderful life together. You're building a family. You're responsible. Everything's good. A year and a half later, the government suddenly passes a law saying that you guys are nothing but little kids. You're not old enough to buy cigarettes anymore. So now neither of them can buy cigarettes legally. So now this man who's fighting for freedom of all things doesn't have the freedom to buy cigarettes. He has to go to his mommy and daddy and ask them to buy him cigarettes. And she has to do the same with her parents. A year later, he finally crosses the new threshold and becomes 21 years old. Now he can buy cigarettes himself. But now, remember, before when his parents were buying him cigarettes, they technically could have got fined for doing that because it's against the law. That's the existing restrictions. If they're going to go beyond that, what comes beyond that? If you work in a store and you sell cigarettes to a, quote, minor, you get a huge fine, you get fired from your job, you lose your livelihood, and you can't feed your own family. That's pretty serious. How are they going to increase that exactly? How? My suspicion is that it's going to involve fees that will devastate someone's life for decades to come. Like huge fees, the kind of fees that they really have no hope of ever paying off. Their life is going to be over, or prison. When I came up with 50 existential threats to America, I had to leave out about a dozen of them because I had to limit it to 50. One of the ones I left out was our prison industry. Our prison system is disgusting. It is an industry. Many of the judges own stock. They actually own a stake in the companies that run prisons. It's in their interest as a judge to send as many people to prison as they can. That's just one problem with our prisons. One. These guys want to send more people to prison just because they bought a pack of cigarettes for someone who's 20 years old. So now, when this husband becomes 21 years old, if he buys a pack of cigarettes for his wife, when they've been smoking for maybe 5, 6, 7 years already, this guy who's out there honorably defending freedom in the military can go to prison because he bought his wife a pack of cigarettes. I've told you that you cannot demonstrably prove that even one person has died because they smoked. Ever. Can't be done. Science can't do it, period. End of story. It can't happen. Doesn't have the capability. But we can show that tens of thousands of people every year, hundreds of thousands, really millions across the world, die in car accidents every year. If I go out and I buy a car for, say I have a nephew, I buy him a car when he turns 16 years old and gets his driver's license. He goes out and gets in a car accident, whether he caused it or not, and he dies. Is that my fault because I bought him a car? Should I go to prison because I bought him a car when he's old enough to drive? Or if I bought him a car before he's old enough to drive, for that matter. What does the fact that I bought him a car have to do with anything? You see, if you smoke a cigarette, you don't die. So if someone buys a 20-year-old, or frankly, a 16-year-old, a pack of cigarettes, it doesn't matter. The point is, the parents are supposed to be the ones determining whether their child is smoking. Not the government. The government is not their parents. The parents are the parents. They gave birth to it. They spent the money. They invested their entire existence for all these years in that child. They are the ones who determine what's going on with that kid. Not the bunch of random yahoos who just happen to be called government. They have the biggest stake. But that's not what we have anymore. It used to be a matter of, when I was growing up, there were kids in school who were allowed to smoke by their parents when they were 13 years old. Still going strong as far as I know, by the way, but they were allowed to smoke. Others, their parents said, no, you got to wait till you're 16. And when they turned 16, then they could freely smoke. Others said, no, 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 you got to wait till you're 18. And they would either wait till they're 18 or they would smoke behind their parents' back, as young people do. That's just life. That's the way life is. It's part of the excitement of growing up. It's a dynamic that belongs in the family and the friends and the community of that kid, not in some government way over in Washington, D.C. If you haven't read our Constitution of the United States of America, it's 4 pages long. Take a look at it. The way our government is supposed to work is a collection of independent states. You see, you have the family unit as the core, which these people want to destroy. You have the family unit as the core. They determine what goes on in their family, specifically with their children. Many families get together and form a community. If it becomes large enough, they will incorporate as an institution, a city or a village. If they do that, they have to elect people to office to be the leaders of that community. Now, because those people are so close, if some megalomaniac, if some boss hog comes into power over their little village, the person's going to be taken out of power quickly. And then the next person who comes into power knows better than to do that again. If you have a bunch of communities like that, they come together as a county. A bunch of counties come together as a state. Now, at that point, when you get to the state level, you have such a distance between the people who are in charge of running the state and the individuals and the families that the punishment for these people when they violate their oath of office is supposed to be much higher. It's supposed to be a capital offense, the death penalty. It's called treason, especially when you get to the federal level. The reason is precisely because there's so much difference, there's so many degrees of separation between the family unit that is the core and the level of government. If a congressman like Pallone, what he's doing here is treasonous. What he's doing violates every single precept of our Constitution. Every concept of what freedom even is. Someone like that should be held accountable for committing treason. Now, if he were held accountable and he received the punishment that is due for treason, guess what? A, he wouldn't be in office to hurt anyone ever again. And B, the next person who comes into his office isn't going to do that again. But we live in a lawless country. Lawlessness is one of my existential threats to the United States of America. You see how all these existential threats overlap and tie together. Federal government, this guy, Pallone, I don't even know how to pronounce this guy's name, and yet he can dictate the terms of existence for millions and millions of Americans, smokers. He can dictate the minute terms of their existence. No, you cannot taste mint when you're smoking. I say so. You're 2,000 miles away. You live in a place I will never travel to. I don't care about. But I dictate, at the end of a gun, you cannot enjoy the flavor of menthol, of mint, when you smoke a cigarette. You must pay this extra amount of money, but ultimately to people like me. This is the problem, folks. When they say increase civil penalties for restrictions on the sale of tobacco products, the irony is that the more laws you implement, the more lawless the country becomes. Because these laws are nothing more than a weapon to hurt particular individuals or groups. They're not meant for the general welfare, which is what our Constitution calls for. They become so specific that they become forms of persecution. I skipped over one of these, I'm so sorry. It prohibits the use of flavored products in electronic nicotine delivery systems. In other words, you can't have flavored vaping anymore. So again, just take away, flavor does not kill. Flavor does not cause cancer. Flavor is a perception in your brain, your sensory organs. When you use your sensory organ of your nose, you perceive an odor. It doesn't exist in the real world. Your mind perceives of it. When you taste something, a flavor, your mind perceives it. It doesn't exist in the real world. When you hear something, there's sound waves going through here, but what you perceive doesn't exist in the real world. Flavor doesn't exist in the real world. It's a perception in your mind. It doesn't cause cancer, folks, but they want to ban it. Why? Because the people thoroughly enjoy those flavors. This is an act of persecution. This is an act of violence against vapers. And that's all it is. The very last point here, of this law, it requires the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, to study e-cigarettes. When electronic cigarettes came out several years ago, within months, and I mean months, just like this ridiculous study on menthol that's claimed to have everything settled. Yep, menthol is more addictive, gotta ban it. Settled science, no need to research anymore. They came out within months. I mean, people weren't even used to what vaping was yet, and that these scientists came out and said that vaping is more dangerous than smoking, which is obviously lunacy, right? They came out, but they said, we've done the research, we've done the studies, this is settled science, we've proven it, it's a fact, we have the PhDs, you don't, this is settled science, no more research is needed. Done deal. Start the process of banning these things, because we've got it all figured out months after these even came into existence. That ain't science. Science takes years. To get real truth on that would probably not just take many decades. It could get into the centuries to gather enough data to even have a reasonable idea of what's actually going on. They knew it all within months. So if they said it's settled and no research is necessary anymore, why is this bill calling for the GAO to study e-cigarettes? Why would they do that? It's not needed. They said themselves, these very people said, but we know all the answers. We know it all. We know everything within months of the invention of this product. Why would they want the GAO to study it? I'm going to actually leave this one as for you, because if I don't help you learn to think for yourself, all I'm doing is doing the thinking and then telling you what's going on. And you're hearing it, and then you go on and watch a Justin Bieber video. I'm going to leave this one for you. It's called the Government Accountability Office. Go research what the Government Accountability Office is. And then think and answer the question for yourself. Make a project out of it. Be a good citizen. Please. You figure out for yourself what's going on with this particular point. I've got to move on to end this video. Congressman Pallone supported the impeachment of Donald Trump. Remember Klobuchar? Klobuchar here in Minnesota? She was caught saying that she's basically said, I'm going to vote against Trump in the impeachment before the trial even began. How would you like that? You're accused of murder falsely, and the judge says, well, I'm going to send you to prison, but let's get started with the trial because we have to go through the formalities. How would you like to have that judge? That's what Klobuchar, actually, she does that all the time. Just like she sent that young guy to prison when the evidence seems to show he was innocent. But she goes after smokers when it's founded on garbage, lies, and junk science. That's called cult mentality. The reason I mentioned that he supported impeachment of Donald Trump isn't because of the politics of Trump and him and whatever. It's because supporting the impeachment of Trump was along party lines. That's a cult behavior. That means this guy is demonstrating he has a tendency toward cult behavior. Well, anti-smoking is a cult. There's some support lent to the idea that this guy is a cult leader. He was an early and strong endorser of Hillary Clinton for president. If you don't know who Hillary really is, you gotta start learning. I'm going to leave that one for you. It's not the time. Here's the next one, though. Here's the big one. He is the chairman of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. Energy and commerce. Gee, my 50 existential threats to the United States of America, one of them that I kept in there was our ridiculous fantasyland energy policy that could destroy us all. He's the chairman of the committee responsible for our energy policy. Remember, folks, I wrote, recorded, and published that video many weeks before I even knew this guy existed in this term. I wasn't talking about him when I wrote that. I was talking about our energy policy. Just turns out that he's the guy who's one of the biggest players in determining our energy policy. That tells you right there, he's not the best thinker in the world. And if you can't think that one through properly, what makes you think he's thinking this one through on tobacco when he doesn't have a scientific background? And about the last thing I'm going to say about this guy is when this bill, this abomination, this institutionalized persecution against smokers and vapers passed the House of Representatives, this guy called a press conference to brag about it, and he surrounded himself with two groups. One of them was the people who bought and paid for him, apparently, from what I can tell, anti-smoking leaders. Because look at his, in fact, I'm going to take a little diversion. Let's look at who gave this guy money. Who's keeping this guy in office since 1988, before many of you were born? Let's look at it. 2020, according to OpenSecrets.org, the two biggest industries that donated to Frank Pallone were healthcare professionals and big pharmacy. They do this every 2 years. Let's go back 2 years. The year 2018. Who were the biggest industries donating to Frank Pallone? Healthcare professionals, big pharmacy. Let's go back another 2 years. 2016. Who were the biggest donors to Frank Pallone? Healthcare professionals, big pharmacy. Perhaps you see a pattern here. Look at the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Healthcare professionals and big pharmacy collectively is the anti-smoking industry, folks. That's what it is. Hundreds of thousands of dollars within these years. Extrapolate that back to 1988, and what do you get? You get millions of dollars, and you get an explanation for how somebody who lives on a civil servant salary, which keeps happening in this government, since 1988, not having a real job, civil servant salary, same as a postal worker, your mail carrier, yet they can come out of that Congress as a multimillionaire. Gee, I wonder how that happened. Given the fact that this bill serves the anti-smoking industry, perhaps you can put 2 to 2 together and get the number 4. The other group this guy surrounded himself with at this party, this after-vote party, was children. These are the children who, according to him, they're not mature or intelligent or experienced or educated enough to know whether or not they should smoke a cigarette until they're 21 years old. Years after they can vote, years after they're legally allowed to serve in public office, serve in the military, years after they're legally allowed to raise children. According to him, they are not competent enough to even know if they should smoke a cigarette or not. But then you flip it over 180 degrees, and when it benefits him to say something else about children, like at this after-vote party, all of a sudden these kids are not only competent, they're more competent than adults are. They're allowed to stand there and say, "Thank you, Mr. Pallone, for saving our lives." And they're allowed to speak to adults, including their own parents, and preach to those adults, "You shouldn't smoke, it's bad for you." Now all of a sudden these kids know everything. They know everything to the point where you can point TV cameras at them, which incidentally, nobody's pointing a TV camera at me, are they? To tell my story. Nobody's doing that to save my life, but they'll point cameras at these little kids that Pallone surrounds himself with because they're competent enough to tell adults the way it is. But then when he talks out of the other side of his mouth, even someone who's 21 years old isn't old enough or responsible enough or educated enough or knowledgeable enough to know whether or not they should smoke a cigarette. They can't buy cigarettes. This guy is exploiting children. Another one of my existential threats to the United States of America. Folks, if I had a son and he grew up to be this guy, I would not just be ashamed, I would be devastated. I don't know how I would recover from it. It's my job as a parent to raise someone who's better than this guy. Someone who takes an entire group, millions and millions and millions of people, and just not only persecutes them, but seeks to legalize and institutionalize the persecution of that group. All because I hate them. That's what the Nazis did. That's what tyrants do. That's what anti-smokers do, and that's what junk scientists do, because, folks, junk science is an existential threat to the United States of America. Please contact your U.S. senators and tell them that if they even think about voting for this bill, they're going to be out getting a new job, and if you have anything to say about it, they're going to get the punishment due to a traitor. And they're going to go to prison. Thank you for watching this. I promise you that case study number 3, unlike this one, is going to be fun. It's going to be something you can actually participate in yourself, so bring a pad of paper and a pen. I think this one's actually going to be fun for you. I'm sorry this one couldn't be, but we're dealing with a group that took its playbook from the Nazis, literally, not figuratively. So case study number 2 was a bummer, and my voice hurts from talking about it. Please come back for case study number 3. It's going to be a whole different story. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so grateful you watched this. Thank you so much.